Mark dropped the wine glass, the sound of shattering crystal cutting through the patio chatter, just as my words about living my best life with my side piece hung in the cool Seattle air. The laughter died, and the world tilted. His face, pale and still, told me everything. A silent accusation more damning than any scream. He turned, leaving the broken glass, and my confession exposed for everyone to see, his departure a chilling judgment. It wasn't always the grand betrayals that tore things apart. Sometimes, it was just a small, stupid joke, uttered in a moment of misplaced confidence, a slight miscalculation of the room. And then everything changed. You watched the hairline fracture spiderweb across the whole foundation, and you knew. It started small. The evening had begun with that crisp, clean Seattle air, the kind that smelled of damp earth and distant wood smoke, promising the full weight of autumn. Joe and Beth's annual end-of-summer party was in full swing, their renovated craftsman house on Capitol Hill buzzing with the hum of 100 conversations. Warm light spilled from the windows onto the porch, illuminating the familiar faces of friends we'd known for years, through various jobs, children, and even a couple of divorces. Each laugh echoing felt like another brick laid in the long wall of shared history. Mark and I had walked in together, hand in hand, a comfortable silence between us. We moved through the crowded living room, exchanging pleasantries. Then, as was our custom, we drifted. He found his corner near the fireplace, drawn to the low murmur of the tech bros, discussing blockchain or some new algorithm. I made my way to the deck, where the air was cooler and the conversations felt lighter. Amy and Brenda were already there, glasses of white wine in hand, leaning against the railing. "So," Brenda began, stirring the ice in her drink, "what's everyone doing to keep the spark alive? Kids, careers? It all just becomes a grind, doesn't it?" Amy nodded, swirling her wine. "It's a full-time job, I swear. Sometimes I just want to book a ticket to Costa Rica and disappear for a week." I chuckled, feeling the comfortable warmth of 2 glasses of Sauvignon Blanc. The conversation was easy. Familiar. "Oh, you know," I said, leaning in slightly, a playful wink accompanying my words. "It's all about keeping things exciting, having a few secrets here and there." I imagined a conspiratorial tone, a shared understanding among women. Amy raised an eyebrow, a slight challenge in her voice. "Secrets? Do tell." Mrs. Perfect Marriage. She knew Mark and I had our rough patches, everyone did. But we'd always presented a united front, a picture of stability. I let out a dramatic sigh, playing up the performance. "Well, if you must know, I've been living my best life with my side piece while Mark is busy with his blockchain buddies." I smiled, expecting laughter, a knowing roll of the eyes. It was a joke, a casual exaggeration for effect. The laughter didn't come. Instead, there was a sudden, violent crash from directly behind me. The sharp, piercing sound of glass shattering on the cedar deck boards. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Mark stood there, just stepping through the sliding glass door, a dark stain spreading on his shirt where the wine had splashed. His hand was still half raised, an empty grip where the glass had been. His face was a mask, stripped clean of all expression, like watching someone's entire world collapse in slow motion. Right there in front of me, the air around him seemed to thicken, sucking out all the ambient noise of the party. The silence that followed felt heavy, cold, absolute. "Mark, baby," I stammered, my voice thin, desperate. "I was just joking. You know me, always making a joke." My words felt inadequate, hollow. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, then at the scattered glass, then back at me. There was no anger, no shouting, just a profound, terrible emptiness. Without a single word, without a glance at anyone else on the deck, he turned and walked slowly, deliberately, back into the bright, noisy house, disappearing into the crowd. The friends on the deck shifted uncomfortably. Amy and Brenda exchanged glances that held more concern than amusement. "She was just joking," I insisted, my voice louder now, trying to convince myself as much as them. But the uneasy quiet that settled over us, the quick, averted gazes, told me they hadn't quite bought it. Beth, ever practical, appeared with a dustpan and broom, already sweeping up the glittering shards of glass. She didn't look at me directly, as she worked. "Maybe you should go talk to him, Sarah," Beth said softly, her voice barely a whisper. The rustle of the broom against the wood, the loudest sound on the deck, that kind of joke.co.insidering your history, my history. Beth's gentle words echoed in my ears as I pushed through the crowded living room, searching for Mark. It was the one stupid mistake from 5 years ago. A drunken kiss with an ex-boyfriend at a New Year's Eve party, back when Mark and I were still navigating the shaky ground of seriously dating. I'd felt a rush of shame and guilt, confessed it to him the very next morning, tears streaming down my face. He'd been hurt, deeply, but he'd forgiven me. Or so I thought. I found him in Joe and Beth's small study, a room usually reserved for tax documents and quiet contemplation. He sat hunched over a leather armchair, illuminated by the cold glow of his phone screen, his thumbs scrolling relentlessly. He wasn't looking at me, not even when I stepped into the room. I closed the door softly behind me, muffling the party's distant thrum. The air in here was stale, thick with his silent anger. "Mark, baby, please look at me." He scrolled once more, then slowly lowered the phone, his eyes still fixed on the blank screen for a moment, before finally lifting them to mine. There was a raw, wounded quality to his gaze that made my stomach clench. "Why would you say something like that, Sarah?" His voice was low, controlled, but it vibrated with a quiet rage that was far more unnerving than any shout. "Even as a joke, why would you ever think that was okay?" I reached for his hand, wanting to offer comfort, to bridge the distance that had sprung up between us. But he pulled it away, a swift, decisive movement that stung more than a slap. "I was just being stupid, Mark, trying to be funny. You know me, I get a little carried away sometimes." It meant nothing. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw the pain, the ghost of an old wound flickering there. "Because I thought I knew you 5 years ago too, Sarah. I thought I knew you wouldn't kiss your ex at a party. I thought I knew you wouldn't do something like that." My own frustration began to simmer, defensive. "That was different. Mark, we were barely dating then, and I told you immediately." I came clean. He stood up, the movement abrupt, pushing the armchair back slightly. "Have you?" His voice was laced with an icy sarcasm that cut deeper than I expected. "Because from where I'm standing, you just joked about cheating on me in front of all our friends. You joked about having a side piece. What's the difference?" He pulled his phone from his pocket, holding it out, a cold demand in his eyes. My hand instinctively tightened around my own phone, which was tucked in my back pocket. The abruptness of his request, the accusation behind it, made me stiffen. "No," the word burst out of me, sharper than I intended. "No, I'm not letting you go through my private messages." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Why not?" he challenged, his eyes narrowing. "What do you have to hide? Because I shouldn't have to prove myself to you." My voice rose, a little too loud, bordering on a shout. The anger, the humiliation, the injustice of it all welled up. "We've been together for 5 years, Mark, married for 2. You should trust me." His voice was a frigid whisper, a stark contrast to my own escalating volume. "Trust has to be earned, Sarah. And right now, you're not doing a great job of earning it." The drive home was an excruciating silence, the only sound the hum of the tires on the wet pavement. He insisted on driving, even though I knew he'd had at least 3 beers. His jaw was set, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road ahead as if he could outrun the tension in the car. I stared out the window, the blur of city lights mirroring the chaotic thoughts in my head. When we finally pulled up to our apartment building, the silence followed us up the stairs. He unlocked the door, walked straight to the guest room, and before I could even take off my coat, the click of the lock echoed in the small hallway. I stood there, clutching my phone, surrounded by framed photographs of our life together. Our wedding day, a hiking trip, holidays with friends. Each smiling face in those pictures seemed to mock me, to amplify the hollow space that had just opened up. The apartment felt cavernous, cold. I shed my party dress, letting it crumple in a heap on the floor, and pulled on one of Mark's old college t-shirts. The soft, faded cotton a small comfort. I buried my face in his pillow, inhaling the faint scent of his soap, a hint of his cologne, and let the tears come. They were hot, silent, born of shock and a growing dread. Hours later, the apartment was still silent, save for the faint sounds of the city outside. Then, I heard him. The rhythmic creak of the guest room floorboards, pacing back and forth. It started slowly, then grew more insistent. A restless energy. Around 3 in the morning, the sudden, sharp hiss of the coffee maker broke the quiet. He was up. He was thinking. I lay in our bed, in his side of the bed, listening. A part of me, a small, hopeful part, wanted to get up, to go to him, to talk, to argue, to fix it, but something held me back. Pride, maybe, or fear of what he might say, of what I might see in his eyes. So I stayed, wrapped in his t-shirt, suspended in the dark. Morning arrived, cruel and relentless, stripping away the comfort of darkness. My dreams had been fragmented, restless, full of trying to speak but no words coming out, like shouting underwater. I'd barely slept. I found him at the dining table, the one we'd picked out together just after we got married. He sat stiffly, a mug of black coffee steaming beside him. Spread out before him were legal papers, thick stacks of them, and his laptop was open, glowing with a spreadsheet. His face was drawn, etched with exhaustion, shadows under his eyes. He looked terrible, like he'd been through a war. He didn't look up when I entered. He just kept staring at the papers. I walked to the counter, my hands clammy. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Then he spoke, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, like he was reciting a grocery list. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my hand flying out to grip the cold granite countertop, bracing myself. The world seemed to tilt, the carefully constructed reality of my life shattering around me. No, Mark, I whispered, my voice barely there. You can't be serious. This is insane. My breath hitched in my throat. He finally looked up, his gaze heavy, tired. I've been up all night thinking about it, Sarah. He took a slow sip of his coffee. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Like what? I asked, my voice rising in a desperate plea. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to shake him, to make him see reason. Mark, nothing happened. It was a joke. A stupid, terrible joke, yes, but just a joke. He slammed his hand on the table, the papers jumping, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. It's not about the joke, Sarah. Or maybe it is. Maybe the joke just made me realize that I never really got over what happened before. His voice cracked, a raw edge of pain finally breaking through his composure. It's always there, you know? Just under the surface. He leaned forward, running a hand through his hair. Every time you go out with your friends, every time you're texting and smiling at your phone, there's this voice in my head, this little voice wondering, what are you hiding? Who are you talking to? Is it happening again? A wave of nausea washed over me. After everything we'd been through, the therapy sessions, the painstaking rebuilding of trust, he still harbored that suspicion. After everything we've been through, I managed, my voice trembling. You still think I would do that? After all this time? You still don't trust me? He pushed a stack of papers towards me, his gaze fixed on them, not on my face. I don't know what to think, Sarah. I just know I can't keep living with this. He gestured to the papers. I had my father's firm draw these up this morning. I stared at the neatly printed words. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, his name, our address, all laid out in cold, legal type. The world around me felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater again. My hands went cold, numb. I couldn't react, couldn't speak, couldn't even cry. My world was crumbling, and I just stood there, watching it fall. 889 words. A week bled into another, each day heavier than the last. The apartment, once a space of comfortable intimacy, had become a tomb. Mark moved through it like a ghost, avoiding my gaze. his presence a constant, chilling reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. I tried to talk to him, to approach him when he was making coffee or grabbing something from the fridge. Each time, I'd begin, "Mark, can we just—" And each time, he'd cut me off with a curt shake of his head, or a mumbled, "Not now, Sarah." He'd retreat to the guest room, locking the door again. Eventually, the silence became unbearable. I called Amy, my voice thick with unshed tears. "He wants a divorce, Amy, a real divorce. Because of a joke." My words came out in a breathless, choked sob. Amy listened, patient and steady on the other end. She didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. When I finally ran out of words, she took a long pause. "That's extreme. Sarah," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I mean, I get he was hurt, but to jump straight to divorce, and with papers already drawn up, it almost sounds like he's projecting something onto you." Her words hung in the air, a disturbing idea taking root in the fertile ground of my own fear and confusion. Projecting. Maybe he wasn't angry at my past mistake, but his own current one. The thought was ugly, unwelcome, but it wouldn't leave me alone. Suddenly, I started seeing everything differently. I began observing Mark more closely, a cold, analytical part of my brain taking over. His phone, which used to lie face up on the table, was now always with him. Always face down. He never left it unattended, not even for a moment. He was suddenly working late more often, too. "Big push at the startup," he'd mumble, his eyes still fixed on his laptop. His explanations were vague, his schedule elastic. He'd come home smelling faintly of stale coffee and something else I couldn't quite place, something a little too sweet. Then there were the calls. He started taking them in the other room, his voice hushed. Sometimes I'd hear snippets through the closed door, a defensive tone, a hurried, "Look, I'll call you back later." Once, I overheard him talking to his dad's firm, not about the divorce papers that were still sitting on our dining table, but about closing a deal, a big one. It didn't make sense. His startup had been struggling for months. A big deal seemed out of nowhere. The unease festered, a cold knot in my stomach. I tried to push it away, to tell myself I was being paranoid, that this was just my own guilt twisting things. But it kept growing. This wasn't the Mark I knew, not the man who always left his phone charging on the kitchen island, who openly discussed his work struggles, who was never vague about his movements. Then came the business trip. "I'm heading to Des Moines for a couple of days," he announced one morning, packing a small carry-on. Impromptu meeting with a potential investor. Again, the vagueness, no flight details, no hotel name, just a quick, dismissive wave of his hand when I asked for more information. As soon as he left, the apartment felt even emptier, but a new kind of silence settled in, one that felt less like a tomb and more like an open field, ripe for investigation. I went online, searching for any news about his startup, any mention of a new big deal in Des Moines. Nothing solid. Just the same old reports of slow growth and missed targets. Later that evening, the heavy weight of suspicion pressing down, I tried to talk to him again. This time over the phone, my voice tight. "Mark, what's really going on? This isn't just about the joke anymore. This is different." He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "You made your bed, Sarah. Don't try to turn this around on me." His dismissal, the coldness in his voice, hardened my resolve. I could let him walk away, let him take everything and redefine our history. Or I could fight for the truth, for a clear understanding of what had really happened, of why he was so ready to throw away 5 years because of a joke. I decided to fight. I needed to know. The business trip to Des Moines turned out to be a single night. Mark returned, tired but evasive, his answers still vague. The next day, he announced another late night at the office. This time, I didn't question it. Instead, a cold dread settled in my stomach, solidifying into a decision. I had to know. I waited until a reasonable hour, then slipped out, my keys jingling softly in the quiet apartment. I drove to his office building, parking a block away, tucking myself into a shadowed spot where I could see his car. The city lights blurred into streaks, and the cold reality of what I was doing, stalking my own husband, settled over me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the car. He finally emerged, not from the main entrance, but a side door, around 8 o'clock. He walked briskly, his head down, and got into his car. I started my engine, keeping a safe distance, following his taillights through the winding Seattle streets. He didn't drive toward home, or toward any familiar restaurant. Instead, he headed to a quiet coffee shop on the edge of downtown. One I'd never seen him frequent. The lights were still on, a few patrons visible inside. I parked across the street, letting the car run, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I watched as he walked in, ordered something. And then, my breath hitched. He sat down at a small table by the window, and across from him, already waiting, was a young woman. She was attractive, with bright, quick eyes and a cascade of dark hair. Definitely younger than me. Mark leaned in, his head bent close to hers, and she laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that I could almost hear through the glass. Then it hit me, a sickening lurch in my gut. The dark hair, the age, the mention of a new hire. Clara, Mark's new assistant. He'd mentioned her a few weeks ago, a casual aside. Nothing more. A new hire, fresh out of college, eager. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone. I zoomed in, the grainy images on my screen capturing the undeniable. Mark, reaching across the table, covering her hand with his thumb stroking her skin, the way they looked at each other, not like colleagues, not like friends. It was intimate, conspiratorial, a shared secret. I took several photos, each click of the shutter a physical punch to my gut. It wasn't just a joke now. It was real, undeniable. The crushing pain that followed was a strange, dull ache, not sharp like I expected, but a deep, hollow emptiness. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the elaborate lie. The weeks of coldness, the accusations, the divorce papers. All of it built on a foundation of his own deceit. Sometimes, the truth hurts more than any lie, but knowing allows you to rebuild. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Later that night, when Mark finally returned, the apartment was dark save for the lamp on the coffee table. I was waiting for him, perched on the edge of the couch. He walked in, dropped his keys, and then saw me. A flicker of surprise, then caution in his eyes. He started to say something, but I cut him off. I took the phone from my pocket, unlocked it, and slid it across the coffee table toward him, the screen illuminating his face in the dim light. The photos flashed, one after another. Mark holding Clara's hand. Mark laughing with her, their heads close together. A silent story of clandestine intimacy. His face went pale, a sickly green under the lamplight. He stammered, "Sarah, what is this? It's just a work meeting. We were discussing, don't lie to me, Mark." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a cold, hard line. "Don't you dare lie to me. Not after everything. Not after the jokes, the accusations, the divorce papers." He crumpled onto the couch, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes squeezed shut. Okay. It's Clara, my assistant." He opened his eyes, brimming with what he wanted me to believe was pain. A desperate plea for understanding. "You have no idea what it was like, Sarah, living with that doubt. That voice in my head after your joke. It ate at me." He looked up, meeting my eyes, a twisted justification in his gaze. I needed to feel something. Too. Even the score. In a way. To understand how you could have done what you did. A bitter, hollow laugh bubbled up from deep inside me, a sound I barely recognized. His affair wasn't a mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a calculated act of revenge, justified by my single, past error, weaponized against me. The hypocrisy was a fresh, crushing weight, heavier than any sorrow. The moment Mark finished his twisted justification, something inside me shifted. The rage I expected, the pain I anticipated, never fully materialized. Instead, a cold, hard calm descended, settling in my bones. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just a man who had cheated, but a profound hypocrite, a coward who had weaponized my past against me to excuse his own calculated betrayal. The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, was gone. Mark, oblivious to the change in my gaze, continued to beg, his voice thick with what he wanted me to believe was remorse. "Please, Sarah, it was a mistake. I swear. I love you. You know I do. This doesn't change anything. Please, please forgive me." With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I nodded slowly. I think I can understand, Mark." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they came out steady, controlled. "I was wrong to make that joke, and my past mistake. I should have earned your trust back better. It must have been hard for you." I even managed a slight, sympathetic shrug. Mark sagged with visible relief, his tense shoulders relaxing. He looked almost grateful. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for understanding." He actually believed me. The thought was chilling. "Maybe," I continued, my voice thoughtful, "maybe we need to truly get away. A fresh start. Go back to Santorini, where we had our honeymoon. Just us. Away from all this." He hesitated, a flicker of something in his eyes. "Santorini? But work and things here." I cut him off gently, placing a hand on his arm, a gesture that felt like a performance. "It's what we need, Mark, to forget all this, to remember why we fell in love." The words tasted like ash. Just a week. A chance to reset. Mark, desperate to fix things, desperate to perhaps escape his own guilt, finally nodded. "Okay. Yes, Santorini. That's a great idea." His relief was palpable. He actually thought we were going to fix it. As he went to his laptop to start searching for flights, muttering about dates and prices, I walked to the kitchen and stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. My face was pale, my eyes a little too bright. I would give him a fresh start, all right, just not the one he expected. My mind raced, meticulously constructing a counterplan. This wouldn't be about healing, about forgiveness. This would be about justice. The next few days were a blur of cold, calculated action. While Mark, buoyed by the prospect of our healing trip, talked excitedly about the blue domes and sunsets, I began my discreet research. Divorce lawyers, of course, but not just any lawyers. I needed someone who specialized in financial fraud. In high-net-worth divorces, I delved into online forums, learning about digital forensics, about how to uncover hidden assets, how to trace illicit transactions. Then I found Clara. Her social media was public, an open book, selfies with designer bags, photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Napa. A lavish lifestyle that screamed not assistant salary. My initial thought, that Mark had cheated to even the score, began to fracture. A new, more insidious possibility emerged. Was this affair truly just about revenge, or was there more to it? Was Clara part of something bigger? Mark, oblivious, seemed genuinely happy. He was talking about booking a couple's massage, about the little taverna we loved on the cliffside. He thought I had truly forgiven him, that this trip would wash away his sins. He believed I was the betrayer, the one who needed to earn back trust. I watched him, the irony a bitter taste in my mouth. He had no idea what was coming. My days became a careful dance of covert operations. Mark, convinced of my renewed commitment, was easier to deceive than I could have imagined. While he spoke of romantic dinners and rekindling our flame, I was systematically draining our joint accounts, moving funds into a newly opened, separate account in my name. I took care to do it in increments, small enough not to immediately trigger an alert, large enough to secure my financial future. I kept coming back to the snippets I'd overheard. Mark talking to his father's firm about closing a deal, and the known struggles of his startup. These pieces, coupled with Clara's suspiciously lavish lifestyle, ignited a deeper suspicion. I dedicated hours, late into the night after Mark was asleep, digging through his computer files, his old emails, anything I could access. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. His startup wasn't just struggling, it was on the verge of collapse. And he was involved in a series of questionable accounting practices. Borderline, if not outright, financial fraud, designed to attract investors who would soon find themselves holding an empty bag. I meticulously gathered every shred of digital evidence, the photos of Mark and Clara, their suggestive texts, incriminating emails about the startup's financial dealings, manipulated spreadsheets. It was all there. A mountain of undeniable proof. My secret meeting with Mr. Davies, the divorce attorney, was a turning point. He was an older man, sharp and unblinking, with a reputation for handling complex cases. I laid out my evidence on his polished desk, a thick file filled with printouts and screenshots. He listened patiently, his gaze never leaving my face. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, a slow nod creasing his forehead. "This isn't just infidelity, Sarah," he said, his voice measured. "This is a clear case of financial misconduct, possibly fraud, and the affair provides motive and moral turpitude. You have a very strong case." A very strong case indeed. He began drafting the divorce papers, not just a simple dissolution, but a strategic document including a request for a significant share of assets and, more importantly, a detailed exposure of the fraud. We discussed timing. Mr. Davies agreed. The best moment for action would be when Mark was most vulnerable, most exposed, away from his usual environment, without immediate access to his usual resources. Santorini. It was perfect. The trip to Greece commenced as planned. I maintained my loving, hopeful facade, a careful mask of a woman desperate to save her marriage. We flew first class, Mark treating me with an exaggerated affection, buying me expensive little gifts, holding my hand more than usual. He was relaxed, genuinely happy, believing we were truly on the path to reconciliation, a fresh start. The irony of it all was a bitter taste on my tongue. Inside, I was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. There was a profound sadness for what we had, for the innocent love that had once existed. There was the burning anger at his betrayal, his hypocrisy, his calculated deceit, and beneath it all, a cold, unwavering satisfaction in my calculated revenge, in the knowledge that I was about to turn the tables in a way he could never anticipate. We spent our days sightseeing, exploring ancient ruins, sharing meals at charming tavernas, reminiscing about our honeymoon. There were moments, fleeting ones, when I would catch a glimpse of the genuine tenderness in Mark's eyes, a flash of the man I once loved, and my resolve would waver, a prick of doubt. But then I would remember the photos of Clara, the fraudulent documents, his cold, dismissive words, and my resolve would harden once more. I decided the final dinner, overlooking the breathtaking sunset in Oia, Santorini, would be the moment. It was the perfect backdrop for a marriage to finally, spectacularly, unravel. Our last night in Santorini, the sunset painting the caldera in hues of orange and purple, felt almost surreal. At the cliffside restaurant, Mark raised his glass, his eyes full of what he genuinely believed was relief and love. "To our new beginning, Sarah," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "to overcoming everything. I love you." I smiled, a serene, almost chilling expression, and raised my glass to meet his. "To new beginnings, Mark." I set my glass down, the click sharp against the table. "Mark," I began, my voice clear and cutting through the gentle chatter of the other diners, "there's something I need to tell you about our new beginning." Then, I laid the photos of him and Clara on the white tablecloth, one by one. "You cheated, Mark. Not because of my joke. You cheated because you're a fraud." I detailed the startup's financial fraud, citing the precise figures, the dates of the manipulated accounts. Then, from my purse, I pulled the divorce papers, already signed by me. "I've filed for divorce, Mark, and with Mr. Davies' help, I'll be taking everything." His face went from confusion to disbelief, then to utter, public humiliation and blazing rage as other diners turned. Drawn by the sudden, low intensity of our exchange, I watched his world crumble, feeling a surge of power, but beneath it, a deep, aching hollowness. The revenge was sweet, but it didn't heal the wound. I returned home alone, to an apartment that now felt both empty and full of my new, painful freedom. The news spread quickly. Mark faced legal investigations, his career ruined, his family disgraced. Clara, it was later revealed, was more than an assistant. She was complicit in the fraud, also facing charges. I began to rebuild, finding a new job, moving to a smaller apartment, embracing my independence. I was stronger, wiser, but I carried the invisible scars of betrayal. I paid the price, and so did he. But the cost was more than money. 297 words. The end. Conclusion. The story of Sarah and Mark, and how a careless joke unraveled a life built on fragile trust, is a stark reminder of how easily our past can haunt our present. It shows how the wounds we think are healed can fester, turning small slights into grand betrayals. In the end, Sarah found a cold, hard justice. But it came at a cost. The apartment, once a home, became a silent testament to shattered promises and calculated revenge. Both paid a price, but for Sarah, the new beginning was tinged with the lingering ache of what once was, a quiet freedom purchased at an unbearable cost. The end.